our greater abilities. So if we just sort of default into some hedonistic, recreational simulation, then that, in my opinion, that doesn't bode well for the survival of the species.
I think.
One second. I'm sorry.
Okay, your seconds up. Okay, so
we're coming very quick. It's remind me of the situation. Imagine the cave people sitting around the fire and talking about the same things. And one man just say, imagine you have lots of berries, lots of meat, and many caves as you like. So what's you gonna do? So it's a very different language and mentality. So we are in a different world. We have different values, different ethics. So the people who's going to live in the next 200 and 300 centuries from now, they may have a quite different point of view what they're going to do in the future. They will play the games which we have no idea. They may use the tools which we didn't even think about it. So.
Well, I think that the issue he's raising is one of sort of evolutionary dead ends that you get into and you don't emerge, because as long as growth and learning and exploration are taking place, yes,
So
you're always going to find new things. On the other hand,
it's a singularity.
I mean, this is the wireheading problem, right? I mean, if you give the average 18-year-old kid the ability to wire his brain into a virtual reality simulation where he has all the attractive young women he wants, and he can be a noble young horseman slaying the enemy, and in the end, after ups and downs, as in a Hollywood movie, you always win the battle and get the beautiful girl and become the king. I mean,
I don't think that would happen.
95% of
Why not?
95% of the people who go in this simulation are never going to emerge. I mean,
Okay, you do it one
same
day.
reason
Can
why
you do this like every day? All right, so
Yeah, why not?
you can do it for a whole year, but then you should get tired and bored from doing the same
So he
thing.
Let them
disagrees. He doesn't
finish.
think it's going to happen.
I never really believed in post-scarcity, because I assumed that when people stop fighting over food, they would just start fighting over something else. Better entertainment, sex,
You
and
have
all
to
that.
change
But
the
what
DNA.
I don't think so.
What happens where everyone has enough? For what we consider as enough from a material standpoint now. That wouldn't be the end of competition between people.
Right.
They would start to find
Which I think is a
other
good
ways
thing.
to compete. And they would start to artificially create scarce commodities to
I
compete
doubt
with
it.
them.
No.
So, well,
I
one
doubt it
of
too.
these
No.
commodities could be, for example, sex. Now, imagine that everyone can have sex with a robot that looks like a human being. If everyone can have that, then you want to have sex with a real human being, because that's something better than what your neighbor has.
maybe not. I don't know.
I believe it would be in many ways.
How about if
And
real
now
humans have a lot of
things,
issues.
And now
How about
things
if you
like
married?
intellectual pursuits, learning about the universe, inventing new things, would be valued from many people as a means to compete with others. Like, think of sport today. Nobody really needs to have a beautiful athletic physique, but many people want to have that anyway, just to differentiate themselves.
It also makes your body feel better with
So
the
what
way
I
that our
think
bodies
is
are
that
built.
if everyone has enough, then a lot of people would start dedicating their energy to creative things, scientific discovery, and the invention.
There's always that
Even
0.01% of the
even
population.
Julia,
just
Yes.
to do something better
That's
than
easy
other
to
people,
say. People
to
wouldn't
stand
do
out.
Some people
from-
will.
There are some people,
Not,
yes.
I
Let the
think
rest of
some
them
people
jack
say
off in
like
virtual
that,
reality.
but not all.
Not all, but many.
See,
What are you
this is.
gonna do?
I think what we need is a value system. I think this is key because, like right now, like values drive what you do with your life, right? And so if somebody values
I don't know.
pleasure or hedonism, they're going to pursue one kind of life. If someone values learning and knowledge, they're going to value something else. And I think part of the problem is how you determine what are proper values, and then how do you preserve those values as you go forward in these kinds of
I sort of
scenarios.
feel like
Hold on, Jay. You started
ethical
with the
system,
importance of
value system.
having free choice.
Yeah.
But then having a common value system is not compatible with
I think a value system.
value. We should let everyone choose their value. I think if you let
I'm not
people choose
disagreeing
their
with that.
value,
Yeah.
I believe most people would choose what I would consider as good values.
Well, yeah,
I believe so.
like the billion Muslim people on the planet.
I don't agree that the majority of these billion Muslim people has values that different from mine. I do know that
by their light, they certainly do.
Most religions do share
I do
common
know that a
values,
very
that's
small subset of them.
If you choose to focus
That's
on
not
those,
that
yes.
Yeah,
But
murder, the basic things like murder and theft and things like that. Most people tend to agree on.
Well, in many religions sanction murder of heretics also. I mean, we can focus on the commonality, or you can focus on the difference.
See, I don't think that cosmism can be divorced from philosophy. I think, like things like objectivism, like libertarianism, I think you have to argue what is a proper view of man, like what, and I think that's a view that's like independent, like substrate independent. So like the way we are now, or whatever it is that we decide to become, what are the values of that society? And I think that there are certain things that should be valued, like the desire to explore, to understand, to improve yourself. And I think like things like competition are good, but as long as they're played out within a fair system where people don't get harmed. And people talk about like getting rid of aggression, getting rid of violence. I'm all for that. I think you want to get rid of the type of aggression where you cause physical harm or emotional pain and suffering to other people. But like you don't want to eliminate so much of that like people become like bland sheep and they just don't do anything.
It is unclear to me
But we don't know
the
how to
role
do
that
this.
competition.
I think with genetic engineering we will find a way to do it.
It's unclear to me the role competition will play once we could fuse into group minds and such. I mean, the whole idea we have of competition is really predicated on being separate individuals. Like if I could take a chunk of my mind stuff and like implant it in your mind with your agreement, it's a whole different dynamic.
Yeah, but people
it's hard to prefigure.
For fun as in sport.
But
why shouldn't we continue to enjoy fun?
Fun?
Football is fun.
I mean,
that's fine. But I think if everybody's doing that at the exclusion of, let's say, exploring the universe, then I think it becomes a problem, right?
That wouldn't happen.
I don't know.
We have very different people, and some people like sport, and other people like exploring. You will always
variability in the
I think if you go deep enough, the whole concept of values becomes a bit confusing and dubious. I mean, what is a value? The value is something a certain mind has decided to maximize as it chooses its actions, but actually what we think we're valuing and say we're valuing may be different than what someone who observes us would see that we're actually valuing. I mean, I think it's not an unimportant concept, but it's sort of a subtle concept.
Well, I think that
human values have shifted very much over human society's growth. Even values that we attach the same word to mean very different things in different generations.
You are advocating joy and growth and those things as values that are independent of any stage of a technological civilization, right? So those are the kinds of values that I'm talking about.
The definition of those yet is very subtle.
They might change. Yeah, right. Okay, so we have to allow for change, obviously, and so 1,000 years from now, there might be new values that emerge. So what you really need is a process of objective, good value determination.
This goes back to Nietzsche. It's the process of reevaluating your values, right?
How do you determine good values?
How do you grow your value system?
Right, and values could very well change as the entire societies that make them up
right?
change.
I mean, how we conceptualize joy and growth and choice now was not the same as we will conceptualize them 100 or 1,000 years from now, right? So I mean,
aren't these all individual choices and
they're not all individual. They're cultural
society
choices.
Kind of spontaneity is an aggregate of individual choices.
Usually, it just follows.
I don't think any society needs to make a centralized decision. Like what values do we need to have?
But there's an emergent.
Just let the people do that.
There's an emergent cultural decision.
Well, you have individual value choice, and you also have culture. Like in the United States, for example, people value freedom. They value democracy. They value certain things like capitalism and competition. So, like, I think cultures have values that, and then you have individuals who may or may not adopt those values, who pursue different values. But I think a society has to be free to the extent that you can allow for individual choice, but at the same time have object. So I think you need value. I think you have to have individual value choice, as long as those values aren't harming entities. But you also have to have an objective, good set of values that are part of the society. And these things at different slices in time, as you go forward, are going to be different.
That becomes subtle because the
Do you
current.
think it makes any sense to say that culture has its own value system, independent of the value systems of the people who form part
In a
of it?
free society, you do.
How can that be? How can the
You have
values
Marxists
of the society,
in America who
yes, but
pursue
how
very
can the
different
values of the society be independent of the values adopted by the people?
Cosmists are pursuing different values than socialists are, or I mean, James Hughes is going to talk tomorrow. He's going to talk a little bit about this. People have very different.
Oh, and
I think you need pluralism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I didn't make my point clear.
I'm sorry.
So
Okay.
you said we had the people with some value. This one. Then you have a society. The society has certain values as well, as you say.
It's like
But I
independent.
think this layer is completely determined by the lower level. I mean,
Not
it isn't like a society makes a decision, let's have this value, and let's
Giulio.
sell this value to the people. It's the other way around.
Sometimes that
There's
happens.
feedback.
It's called voting and laws. I mean, sometimes that does happen.
Julia,
Don't vote on
you
values.
think the values
But
exist
laws are
independently?
values are implicit in the laws that get passed in a
I
culture.
don't know.
So if you outlaw abortion, aren't values implicit in that law?
Yes, but if
You're
you
valuing certain things.
Yes, but if you outlaw abortion, that means
we
that
should
the
be
majority of the voters have values that go against abortion. That's why the societal value is a consequence of the values of the individual.
I think both. I think that. I guess what I'm arguing is that both exist, right? But that you need to have an objective set of values in a society that are good, and that I think within that you also have to allow some room for individuals to make individual value judgments.
Your view is very Western, because in the Oriental view, the societies, the collective values, will be seen as determining the individual values primarily, and you're putting it the other way around. So that's seems very culture specific. But I mean, I would. We're going to